He is amazing. He is my brother.
So she's biased.
So I'm just a little biased. But also, I want to point out that he is incredible. He's been in lots of magazines. They actually did a pilot show for him that didn't take off, but it was pretty awesome that they even would do a pilot. And so anyway, he's got a lot of great things to say, and I hope everybody gets a lot out of it.
Thanks. So, hi. Yeah, like she said, I'm David, and I'm just, this is a little outside of my wheelhouse because I don't normally spend a lot of time speaking to people outside of my industry, but I love the opportunity to actually do so, and this is a combination of some of my favorite topics, and one of them is my love of fashion and all things aesthetic, but also of women's issues in particular, because this is something that's been really dear to me for a long time, partially because my mom is also here. Say hi to my mom, Linda, over there. I grew up primarily with a single mom who had 4 children, and I watched her have to go through things that I'm sure none of us have had to go through, and hopefully nobody will have to go through in the future. But it was a changing job market where women weren't really welcomed in the same way that they are now, and even now there are still issues. As we all probably know, women still make about 80 cents on the dollar compared to men in the same positions. We're all aware of that, right? So that's kind of an unfair situation. And so I work primarily with women, obviously, in a hair salon. And so women's issues are important to me on all of those levels. So I really like talking to this subject in particular. I want to thank Brooke, and I want to thank the rest of NAWBO for having me here. I'm very flattered and humbled to have the opportunity to even speak to you guys, to be taken seriously as somebody who has an opinion worth hearing on these subjects is something that I really do appreciate, really do feel humbly about. I am here to kind of talk to you about what I consider to be a potentially sensitive subject. So in my salons, I have to talk to my stylists on a fairly regular basis, especially the new ones, about the way that they look. And there are often tears, and there are often some pretty hysterical responses to this discussion because it feels like a personal attack. I've even had people quit when I've told them, I'm sorry, we need to talk about the way that you dress. And perhaps in my industry it's more important than in most because we are in my opinion, the fashion industry. Most people think I'm a hairdresser, and I am, but I consider myself an offshoot of the fashion industry because you can't really do one without the other. You can't have great clothing and terrible hair, you still look unfashionable. You can't have great hair and terrible clothing, you still look unfashionable. They go hand in hand. They follow the same indicators. They move in the same directions all the time. They're based on the same things. So in my opinion, I'm in the fashion industry. I'm not really in the hair industry. I see it as that. So we talk about fashion, and we talk about why fashion matters. And there are some realities that we all think that it should be what's inside that counts. And so the reason that I called this conversation, and that's what I hope it is, because you guys are free to jump in whenever you feel like it. I would love to take as many questions as I can get from you. Although what's inside does matter, and I think ultimately maybe matters most for very big parts of our lives, marriages and friendships and that sort of thing. But what's outside matters too. The reason that what's outside matters too is that whether we like it or not, the minute that we walk into a room, people begin judging us. Why? How could they possibly know who you are on the inside? They only know what they see on the outside. And what they assume is that the outside is a representation of what's on the inside. And this is actually evolutionary. This isn't simply something that we learned in a modern culture. This is from way, way back. As a matter of fact, people trust our bodies more than they even trust our words, right? Body language, we've all read the studies about how 90% of what people hear is not what you actually say. So as a husband, I got to tell you, that is annoying. So, it's not what you said, right? Why isn't it what I said? Not even a little? No? Some bizarre interpretive language only you know and you get to make up? Okay. Perfect. Anyway, but there's fact to that. The reason for that is words can lie. People assume bodies don't lie as much. And so all of this matters. And the way that I talk to my people about it is I talk to them about, imagine you're a bottle of, I'm in the hair industry, so I'm going to use shampoo. Imagine you're a bottle of shampoo. let's say what you have inside is maybe the most amazing stuff that the planet has ever seen. But if what's on the outside doesn't look appealing enough, nobody's going to want to know what's on the inside. And so how do you deal with what's on the outside? And what's on the outside isn't just the way that you dress. It's your demeanor, it's your attitude, it's your posture, it's all of these things. It's also the way that you speak, right? The way that you speak is sort of like the words on the bottle. So without all of these things in place, you could have an amazing product and nobody would care. So we're also animals that are driven by aesthetics. We love pretty things. Right? I mean, we all go on vacation and take pictures of the same pretty things that 20,000 people have taken pictures of today already and think ours is better. Right? So we love pretty things. There's nothing wrong with actually embracing the fact that what's outside does actually matter. It's a really good thing. But I'm going to go into some interesting studies that are going to maybe even surprise you. There's a little bit of a double standard still for men and women in the workplace. We all know that, like we said, 80 cents on the dollar compared to a man. But there's something else that's kind of interesting psychologically. Like when you think about what women go through versus what men go through, the traits, the character traits, the personality traits that serve a man well in business, right? Being assertive, being, you know what I'm saying? Being out there, being strong. Those also serve him very well romantically. They're the same traits that people find attractive in both areas. When you think about women, it's starting to change now, but it used to be, and only a few years ago, it used to be really bad where if a woman showed the same strengths that it takes for her to push past the glass ceiling, so she had to outman a man, she had to out-aggressive the aggressive in order to be successful in her chosen field. If she exhibited those same character traits in the area of love, she would be pushed down, right? And so this is unfair. Now you've got this difficult double standard to deal with in addition to the fact that you're already facing a more difficult climb. So I don't know, I think it's an interesting topic. Before we go too far though, I probably should go into like some of my history. Why should you listen to me in the first place, right? And I've been a hairdresser, like Brooke said, for about 25 years, a little longer than that. And I've been kind of all over the world. I've gotten the opportunity to, I've run or owned 15 or 20 salons in my time. I've trained thousands and thousands of people. From on stage to in the classroom, my passion has been education ever since I was a young person, before I ever became a hairdresser. And so, you know, I got the opportunity to fly all over the world and was able to do some of the biggest hair functions that have ever existed, and stood on stage in front of thousands of people and had the opportunity to engage with them and to learn from them, but also to hop all over the world and teach teachers what to teach other people. And so I've been lucky enough to have my fingers in thousands and thousands of people's minds, so to speak, and gotten the opportunity to help them to understand better what's going on with their own industry, which again is the fashion industry. But I've also, like I said, I've owned like 6 salons. I have an academy, a hair academy in addition, that's co-branded with L'Oreal Professional, which is one of only 6 in all of North America, which is pretty exciting. We have 4 brands, including the academy, and we do about $6 million in revenue. We have about 115 employees. And so it's a lot. It's been a lot. I've been backstage at New York Fashion Week, LA Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week. As a matter of fact, my salon company is the exclusive company for all of LA Fashion Week. We do all of the hair for that. So I know a lot about fashion, but I also know a lot about teaching. And those two kind of converge in an important way in my salons, because we teach them that fashion is what they do. We teach them that fashion is what their clients actually care about, what they're really coming in for. They're not coming in for a hairdo. They're coming in for a look. They're coming in to feel good about the way that they look. So, I don't know. I only ever wanted 3 things, though, growing up. And it's funny, because whenever I talk to a group of people and they say, well, I don't really know what I want to do, and I know this isn't that group, but just as a funny aside, I only ever wanted to be 3 things. One was a therapist. Then I realized that I'm probably too sensitive to live 8 hours in other people's problems. You know, I'd probably have a really hard time with that. The second was I wanted to be a teacher. Always wanted to be a teacher. Problem was I found out how much money teachers made, and I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. It seems unfortunate that that is the way that our culture is set up. And And the third thing was a rock star. I always wanted to be a rock star. I think that's the dream a lot of kids have. Not really a sports star, but a rock star. So, huh?
If you look the part,
Thanks.
you're a rock star.
Well, here's the funny thing though. So I didn't know what to do out of high school. I started doing hair at about 15. I just started cutting hair on all of my friends. I was born around here. I was actually born only a few miles from here in Ogden. Pretty humble beginnings. We didn't have much money. As I came up through the ranks, I had to find my path. And as a young guy from Utah, even though I was doing hair ever since I was 15 years old, unlike the 6 punk rock kids that I knew, because nobody else would do their hair, even though I had been doing it and I'd been writing and sculpting and writing poetry and always wanted to play music, I never really kind of considered myself to be a very creative person, and ended up going to college. And about a year and a half into college, after deciding to only focus on academics, I didn't want to do anything creative because I wanted to take it seriously, whatever that meant to an 18-year-old guy. And so about a year and a half into it, I wanted to kill myself. I was kind of done. I felt dead inside, and I figured the only smart thing to do would be to drop out, move to LA, and become a rock star, right? So that makes total sense, doesn't it? So years later, I was talking to a group of people similar to this in a classroom in Canada, and they asked me the same question that I'm kind of answering now. Did you always want to be a hairdresser? No, I didn't even know that I wanted to be a hairdresser. I just was a hairdresser. It just made sense to me. I never thought that it was difficult because it wasn't difficult. I didn't know that I had something maybe a little bit more suited to that than the average person because it just came naturally. So it's hard to take it seriously. So they said, well, what did you want to be? I said, well, I wanted to be a teacher, a therapist, and a rock star. And they said, well, you are a teacher. You're sitting here in the room with us. You're teaching all of us. And someone else said, well, you're also a psychologist. We're all kind of pop psychologists as hairdressers. And I said, yeah, we're like the bartenders of the new millennium, right? Like we get to hear all that stuff. I could tell you some stories, some crazy stories, but some fun stories too. Some really heartwarming stories as well. And someone else said, well, I saw you on stage, so you're kind of a rock star. And I thought that's interesting. It's interesting because wherever you go, there you are, so to speak, right? I only wanted to be those 3 things, and on some level, I found an avenue through which I could become all 3 of those things in my own small way. And so I bring that now, and I've been very analytical my whole life. I think it's the teacher in me. And so I used this analytics as a young guy in high school, early high school, when I was pretty invisible. In junior high school, almost nobody knew who I was because I was just a scared and shy person. I was so cripplingly shy that it didn't matter if it was a cool guy or a pretty girl or whatever. If they tried to talk to me, I'd be like, ugh. I'd freeze up. I'd be like, I like bread, or something strange that had nothing to do with anything. And so I hated that about myself. And I decided I was going to be popular, and I was going to figure out how to be popular in high school. And so I cracked the code. And the code was essentially dress really cool, and if you're shy, act like it's because you're too cool for them, right? I can't talk to you anyway, so I'm going to act like I'm doing it on purpose. And it worked. It worked really well. The combination of the two was a really powerful combination. And I kind of went by the Beatles' philosophy of fashion. You remember the song Come Together? There's a line in that song that says, got to be good looking because he's so hard to see. You guys remember that? Yeah. So I figured if I just pile a lot of stuff on myself, people will assume that I'm better looking than I really am. So maybe a beard, maybe some glasses, maybe a hat, maybe a bunch of clothing, maybe those things might help, right? And so the assumption that I'm better looking than I really am at least made me feel better. So I used the analytical nature of what I'm talking about, what I hope to bring some of today, to even bring myself into where I was. And I've used fashion ever since then as a means not only of an expression, but more importantly as a means of telling somebody something I want them to know about me, right? And I think we all do that, but sometimes we do it accidentally, or we don't know what we're telling somebody. So we're going to get into a little bit. Let's see. I'm just going to make sure that I don't miss anything. this is going to sound self-serving, and I don't mean it to, but it's more to put context. People are willing to pay me over $300 for a haircut. Now, that's important not because I'm awesome. That's important because people don't just give money to people, right? They want to believe that you're going to do something really special if they're going to give you all of that money. So, so my test for my people in my salon is that if you haven't already won before you even speak to somebody, you've already lost. You have to have already built that amount of trust based on the way that you look, the way that you walk, the way that you greet. If you haven't already done that, you've already lost. You're going to be fighting an uphill battle ever since then. I've had situations where people have walked by, stopped, and decided that they want a haircut from a specific stylist, me included occasionally, simply because of the way that they look. Now, again, I'm in a visual field, but I don't think that it's unique to hairdressing. I think that it's actually kind of similar all the way around. So it's a pretty serious thing. But it's not just about it's not just about vanity. I worried about that when I was a young hairdresser. Do I really want to be in an industry that just plays to people's vanity, making vain people feel better about themselves? And I really didn't want that. And I've been lucky enough in my career to find out that that's not actually the case. But what's fascinating too is that I live in the hills above Malibu, right? And when I went to Malibu for the first few times, there were more than this, but 3 basic types of dress that were really fascinating to me. The first type was the working class, the guys that came into Malibu to work at the places that are there. And they looked like working class. And then there was the second class, which is the normal people that live in Malibu, which are already pretty wealthy, right? Very well put together. They spend time and energy and money on the way that they look. They're trying to put forward a good impression. People like myself. Then there was the third type, and these are the really fascinating guys. And these are going to come in a little bit later. The third type was, I've always wanted to create a website based on Malibu, homeless or billionaire, right? Because these guys dress so horribly that you could think that they might actually be homeless, except that you can see their $75,000 watch, right? And the reason that they dress this way is because they don't have to dress up for you. You come to them. They get to do whatever they want. And that kind of casual, that kind of ownership of the room, so to speak, they can pull off because they have that degree of money. But there's a certain lesson to be learned from that casualness that's very, again, going to come in a little bit handy later. But as far as vanity is concerned, if we just talk about the way that we look and, making the way that we look better and how we can play on that and use it as a business concept, sure, that's fine. We'll find out later that actually does matter and how much money you make, but I think it's more than that. As a matter of fact, I know it's more than that. So let me just do this. I'm going to play a video for you guys.
I always thought people were so cute when they have the little cheeks and they're rosy, but mine are pretty plain. If I was gonna change one feature about my face, I would say that I would want fuller lips.
I'm definitely a person that looks tired when I'm tired, and when people say that, I immediately am like, oh man. I'm starting to already get little crow's feet and stuff, which my mom has, so yeah.
I'm a forensic artist. I was trained at the FBI Academy in 1993 in composite art. Worked for the San Jose Police Department as the police artist from 1995 to 2011.
We didn't really know what we were doing, so that was nerve-wracking for everyone.
I showed up to a place I had never been and walked into this big warehouse, and at the very end there was a guy with his back to me with a drafting board.
I had a curtain separating me so that I don't see him. We'll begin. First of all, tell me about your hair.
Brown, long, I guess a little bit past my shoulders.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
Yeah, they're brown eyebrows, dark brown eyebrows.
Okay.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
I guess I haven't really compared it to anyone else's chin, but especially when I smile, I just feel like it kind of protrudes a little bit.
What would be your most prominent feature?
I kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
You sort of realize, oh man, now I have to talk about myself and think about my looks.
I'm 40, so I'm starting to get a little bit of the crow's feet thing going on.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
I still didn't know. All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin was a nice, thin chin.
The women were really critical about moles or scars or things like that, and yet they were describing just a normal, beautiful person.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke and were very expressive.
The length of the nose, what is that like?
Short.
Short.
Yeah, cute nose.
Her face was fairly thin.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
Okay. So here we go. So this is your self-described image? And then somebody else described you and I did this sketch.
I have this whole thing about having dark circles and crow's feet around my eyes, and that was not part of the sketch at all that The Stranger did. The Stranger's was a little more like gentle.
That's pretty different. Which is very strange. She looks closed off and fatter. She just looks kind of shut down. Sadder, too. The second one is more beautiful.
You think they're catching more of that from you?
Yeah. She looks more open and friendly and happy. I've come a long way in how I see myself, but I think I still have some way to go.
I have some work to do on myself.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah. Chloe's perception was so clearly different. Her picture looked like somebody I thought I would want to talk to and be friends with, like a happy, light, much younger, much brighter person. It's troubling. I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Our self-perceptions are generally kind of harsh and unbecoming when really that's not how the world sees us. We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right, and we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Pretty surprising stuff, right? what's scary about that is that, to some degree we all do it, but I think women more than men are likely to look at themselves in this way. But people don't see us in the same way that we see ourselves. I think it's an important place to start, but I think it's important to even start before that. There's a reality check to happen here. One of the women in there mentioned that her mother told her that she had some sort of issue, and that it started then, that being pretty was all that mattered. Being pretty was the only thing that defined us as people. But as we're going to actually find out, that being attractive isn't the same as being pretty. Being attractive is more of a way that you present yourself than necessarily having to have specific classic beauty. All of that can be enhanced with the right hair, the right makeup, the right clothing, which of course we can talk about, but a lot of it is actually based on much more powerful stuff than that. And we need to start with our kids, because there are some scary facts. Here are some of them. 30% of teenage girls would miss an important event if they didn't feel like they looked good. That's kind of scary. Almost 1 in 3 would decide not to go do something that they really wanted to do, whatever it was, because they felt like they didn't look as good as they should. How often do we feel like we don't look as good as we should? Pretty often, I would say. But they're just teenagers, right? What's the big deal? Well, 20% of them wouldn't even go to school. That means 1 in 5 girls would miss class if they felt like they didn't look the way that they needed to look, impacting potentially the rest of their entire lives and actually setting in motion a type of self-judgment that you start to see in these videos here. But again, these are just kids, right? How can this really be affecting us? Well, the reality is that 17% of even adult women would miss a job interview if they felt like they didn't look good. Isn't that scary? 1 out of 6 women would say, you know what? I'd rather not get the job. I'd rather not even go than give that a shot. All over the internet, since the advent of YouTube and all that other stuff, there are these disturbing videos. And there are something like 10,000 of these videos that are, am I ugly? I'm going to show you one quick one. It's a very short one, but it's, it's scary that this is the kind of stuff that girls have to start.
I have a question. People tell me this all the time, so I don't know. Is it true? People say I'm ugly. So, tell me, am I?
So there are, like I said, about 10,000 of those videos across the internet. Young girls asking honestly, am I ugly? Somebody please help me. Somebody please tell me. I get conflicting messages. My mom tells me I'm pretty, but my friends all tell me that I'm ugly, and people are so mean and cruel, and all of the bullying that goes on. I think that we need to start way, way back with our young people, both with boys and girls, but boys the way that they talk to girls, and also boys the way they see guys. I used to think one of these days we're all gonna elevate, and it just seems like instead of all of us elevating, we've drugged men down into the same category of women, of needing to be this physically perfect specimen in order to have any real value in the world. Do you guys ever, probably not, but do you ever read about what Hugh Jackman does to look like Wolverine? Yep. You have? It's pretty fascinating and terrifying. It's terrifying because about 6 months before he plays Wolverine, he gets nutritionists, workout people. He has a whole team of people that work with him to give him the exact right amount of calories, the exact right amount of carbohydrates at the exact right times with the exact right amount of proteins. He has to eat every 2 hours. He works out like 8 hours a day. It's bananas. Then, in order to get the protein in at the right times, they wake him up every 2 hours to stuff him with a chicken breast. Like, this is what it takes for a person to look like Wolverine, but this is a person. This is something, it's not even like Barbie. Everybody talks about how, oh, Barbie's giving a bad right for women, and she is. But what about Wolverine? This guy's actually showing that this is what a human can look like. This person is saying, okay, here's what the physical nature of a man is best expressed as. And so we're all now going down this terrible road of all that matters is what's on the outside. But I think if we at least start with our kids, we have a shot at making things a little bit better. I don't know. maybe I don't know, maybe I'm just dreaming, but I start with my children. I have two small children, little girls. My daughter's 10 now, but when she was 4, I remember her sitting in the back seat. And you know, when they're 4, there's a lot of sound that comes out, but not a lot of content. And so she's sitting in the back seat and she's talking. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, okay, cool. And at some point, you know, she pops up and she goes, "Daddy, why am I so pretty?" And I was like, wow, you know, it hit me kind of hard because, of course I tell her that she's pretty. Of course you're going to tell your kids that. But, you know, I also try to reinforce that she be smart and that she be kind and that she be, you know, and I told her all of those things are more important than being pretty, and those are things that you can control, where being pretty to some degree is outside of your control. And I was like, you know, these things are more important. Be funny, be giving, be intelligent, be hardworking, be industrious. Those things are more important. And she kind of considered for a second and she goes, "No, Daddy." She actually said, "Oh, Daddy, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think you understand. We live in LA where there's nothing more important than youth and beauty, right?" So that was pretty terrifying. And it made me realize that whenever somebody met my daughter, they'd always say, the very first thing that they would say is, "She's so beautiful." Now, I happen to think they're correct. However, that's all she's ever hearing every day, day in and day out, how beautiful she is. Every single person that meets her, "Wow, you're so beautiful." Well, great, I'm glad that you think that she's beautiful. And what do I expect? You look like you could be very intelligent. You know, they can't tell, like we just talked about in the beginning, they can't tell what's on the inside, they can only tell what's on the outside, but they continue to reinforce what's on the outside. And I think starting with, yes, sure, tell them that they're beautiful, but tell them that they're more than that. Tell other people's kids that they're more than that. One of my favorite things to talk to my kids about is that whatever you practice, you'll get good at, which sounds pretty simple, until they start to realize that if you practice doing nothing, you get real good at that too. So practice what you want to be good at, and so they eventually start to learn that. But in the end, the way that they look is going to be called out in a positive or a negative. My son was called a hobo the other day. He said, "You look like a hobo," which is funny to me because I can't remember the last time I called somebody a hobo, you know. And I was like, "You sure they said hobo? That they didn't say homo?" No, it was hobo. It was for sure hobo. Because I guess his outfit wasn't as, you know, put together as it should be. He's in 3rd grade. You know, they're worried about whether or not he looks like a hobo. You know, so this is happening to all of our children. So when we talk about feeling attractive, it's more about feeling attractive than actually being attractive. Being attractive obviously helps, but feeling attractive is the energy that I'm talking about. When you come forward with that sort of energy, people treat you as such. It's more important, as a matter of fact, in terms of studies that we'll see later, that you behave attractive than you are actually physically attractive. And there's some interesting studies. I have some resource lists at the end that you guys can take a look at if you want, but here's some facts. Did you know that people who are attractive or perceived or feel attractive, they perform better in cycling? I thought that was funny. I threw that in there for whatever reason. They actually do better in the Tour de France, it turns out. Attractive people do better in the Tour de France than unattractive people. Isn't that weird? I don't know why. I just wanted to put it in there. It doesn't have anything to do with what I'm saying. But they have more fully developed personalities. Now, this goes counter to what most of us think. Many of us think that the unattractive people have to develop their personalities in order to compensate for the fact that they're unattractive. But the reality is that because they're attractive, they're less afraid in social situations, and so they exercise their personalities more commonly, right? They're more likely to get out there and to talk and interact, and that actually creates that ability to have more fully developed personalities. They're not trying to disappear. They live longer. That's another interesting thing. Attractive people tend to live longer than unattractive people do. They report a higher level of life satisfaction. We can imagine that, right? That makes some kind of sense. But how about this last one? That they're more intelligent. Now that goes totally the opposite of what all of us thinks. Right? That attractive people don't have to be smart because they're attractive and they get away with everything, and unattractive people have to develop their intellect in order to compensate for the fact that they're not attractive, right? Not true. It turns out that attractive people test on average about 10% higher in overall IQ scores than people who aren't attractive. Why do you think that's true? Well, really kind of the same reason. Because ever since they're little kids in high school, let's go back to that, ever since they're little kids, the people that don't feel as concerned about the way that they look, who feel confident about the way that they look, they put their hands up. They answer those questions. They engage in meaningful conversation in social situations where they exercise their intellectual muscles. And that's where, as we talked about, whatever you practice, you get good at. So if you're busy disappearing into the woodwork because you don't want anybody to talk to you because you're afraid that they're not going to like you for the way that you look, you're not exercising your intellectual muscles. So they tend to be smarter, on a high degree smarter. 10% smarter is a lot. So imagine you're scoring 115 on an IQ test. The average attractive person is going to score 10% higher than that. So 125. That's pretty significant. So they actually do better. And all of this is simply not because of the way that they literally look, because of the way that they feel about the way that they look. So let's see. They make more money. Here's one of the reasons that we're here. Attractive people make more money. Now, we all kind of know this, but the reality is that from studies, they're actually saying that attractive people make 5% more money than average people make. Kind of scary. But what's really scary is they make 10% more than people who are considered to be below average in terms of their attractiveness make. So again, that's a pretty significant amount of money potentially. If you're making $100,000 a year, it's an additional $10,000. And for those of us who think about finances this way, let's think about it in terms of business. Most of us, we want our lives like a business. If we're lucky, we have 10% left at the end with which to do what we want to do with, right? So let's think about that for a second. You make $100,000, you have 10% left, you have $10,000 of spendable income, right? Discretionary for whatever you want. If you made an additional $10,000, you're doubling your discretional income, right? You're going from $10,000 to $20,000 discretional income if you haven't changed your expenses. That make sense? So people who are attractive potentially have sometimes double the discretionary income, if they're looking at life that way, than people who are not as attractive, simply by again, putting themselves out there, by being confident enough to ask, by being confident enough to engage in ways that people who actually control whether or not they make money are willing to give them the shot, right? So, but this one's interesting. Greater stock returns for attractive CEOs. They did a study, I think it was Forbes, did a study based on the general attractiveness of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And they found out that the ones who have what would be considered to be more attractive CEOs actually had better stock returns than those who didn't. Weird, right? So that may be because this person would tend to be more likely to be charismatic and able to move their team in ways that somebody who was less charismatic may not be able to. Not really sure what that implies, but it's just interesting that that's actually the truth. So these are, I don't know, they're pretty interesting facts. But we also know that, you know, there's this old thing. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. We've all heard that. I don't remember where, some commercial somewhere. This matters because you can't take that. You know how long it takes to redo a first impression? They actually did a study on this too. They do a study on everything. Once a first impression is made, it takes you, I think they said, 6 times of interacting with that same person again to change that initial impression. That's how important a first impression is. People decide almost immediately when you walk in the room whether or not you're somebody that they're going to take seriously in whatever role. I actually toyed with the idea today of coming in front of you guys in just jeans and a t-shirt and then slowly getting dressed as we sat and spoke to see how your perception of me would change, to literally begin to add items and to talk about the items and what they meant to me and why I was wearing them in this particular situation, right? So I thought, okay, I'll come out in jeans and a t-shirt, really basic, and then I'll begin to put some things on. And I'll talk about how maybe this jacket makes me look like I'm professional but still edgy, right? Maybe this hat gives me a fashion-forward impression that I'm trying to put out there. Maybe this bracelet implies that I have a little bit of success behind me, right? Like we can talk about what all of these items were, what their intentions were for, and why I was going to put them out there for you. But I thought that would be a little bit weird and cumbersome as I'm, you know, tucking my shirt in, and you know, that's hard to do without unbuttoning my pants, and nobody wants that. So anyway, but you get the point. The point is each thing that we choose either has a purpose or it doesn't have a purpose. If we're putting it on accident, then we've got a problem. If it has a purpose that's outside of business, right, like a wedding ring, I move this around. I hate I hate things on my fingers. But anyway, like a wedding ring, then that obviously has significance outside of business, but it also sends a message to whoever it is that you're speaking to. So everything is sending a message, whether we like it or not. And the really interesting thing is that, we talked about before, there's some good news. There are countless resources on how to make yourself more attractive. We don't really need to go so much into that. I mean, you could search the internet. There are probably 200 billion things that will talk to you about how to become more attractive. But the most important things seem to be things that we can actually control. And so rather than trying to paraphrase, I'm going to read this bit of a study in an article that somebody did that may help us understand. The surprising results of this research study pointed out that, by far, the most attractive features of a person fall under the category of self-care. Specifically, their research showed that it didn't matter how often someone went to the gym or whether someone had a straight nose or eyes that were crossed. Physical characteristics were not high on the list at all. The most important features were characteristics that people had control over, like good grooming, nice hair, fitting clothes, good posture, and healthy weight. To put it in a nutshell, this study showed that what made men and women desirable was if they put forth the effort to take a shower, groom, select nice clothing, look people in the eye, and manage their diet a bit. In other words, these were all things that people could control if they had an interest in changing. In addition to these changeable factors, the Morabian and Blum study also identified other factors that were about 1/3 as important as the above features. These included masculinity, femininity, attitude. And in this regard, women were attracted to men who did regular exercise and worked to stay healthy. But 1/3 was all the stuff that we talk about. 1/3 was the stuff that we obsessed about. I obsessed about myself when I was a teenager too. Oh, my nose is too big, and my jaw isn't strong enough, and all the things that we obsess about over ourselves. Turns out 1/3 of that is what people really consider or concern themselves with in terms of whether or not they find you attractive. It's all the other stuff, the stuff that we can control. Thank God, right? The things that we can control are actually going to make the difference in our lives. So that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. I really wanted to get that out of the way because I worry that it could be taken as a vanity to be talking simply about the way that we look, without the context of understanding why the way that we look actually matters so much. So I'd like to get into some actual slides that we've put together that talk about some current trends in business fashion that we think are interesting. The most important thing to think about with fashion is that this stuff may or may not apply directly to you. But I've tried to go for a couple of things that go across a couple of different categories depending on your personality, your type of business. Hopefully, some stuff about body shape that can be helpful. But ultimately, none of it is meant to be taken literally. It's all meant to be like things to be pulled from. And what I would love to do is to try to get you guys to look at these photos and rather than immediately judging them negatively, because the first thing that we're going to do as women is look at other women and go, whatever, right? It's not that hot, right? Instead of doing that, try to take in what this outfit is saying to you. Try to take in, how would you feel about this person if they walked into a room? And then what can I take from that? And if nothing, that's fine. But if there is something that you can take from it, great. Not everybody can afford to dress this way. Not everybody wants to dress this way. That's totally fine. But there are still items that you can take. People always say that to me. Oh, I watched a fashion video. It's so crazy. I can't believe that's fashion. And they poo-poo all over the fashion thing. But they don't understand that it's not meant to be worn literally on the street. It's meant to be taken from as an attitude, as a feeling, as elements. Not specifically. Now, these aren't high fashion. These are meant to be more accessible. But still, they're not meant to be seen as like a picture of what we should be recreating necessarily. But anyway, so let's get to it. I wanted to do something on minimal and classic. So obviously, these are all really beautiful outfits with really beautiful girls wearing them. But when we wear outfits, they all kind of need to tell the same story. Do I need to turn the lights down, or are you guys okay? I should probably turn the lights down, huh? That working? Okay. When we talk about body shape, I chose these for different reasons. You can get away with a lot of stuff if you're long and lean or whatever. A lot of us like to wear pants. That's cool. What I see a lot of people doing is these short pants, but they're often like tight. They're more like pedal pushers. And then they wear flats with the pedal pushers. And what this ends up doing, especially for people who don't have perfect bodies, is it chops their body into segments with horizontal lines. So when we're thinking about how to accentuate bodies, faces, whatever, the very basic thing to remember is that anything horizontal will widen, anything vertical will stretch, right? So if you want things to look more vertical, we'll put vertical lines or use vertical line patterns, or literally use vertical lines in terms of our clothing. If we want to chop things up, let's look at her bangs over there, her bangs over here. See how they're kind of split? Both of their bangs are split open. The reason for that is that they wanted to expose a little bit of positive space in their foreheads. You guys all know what positive and negative space is, right? Positive space is lighter, brighter. Negative space is darker, shadowy. So you could put, because they're pretty girls, you could put probably a straight fringe across them. But if you look, both of them have strong cheekbones. So both of them, they split their fringe open in order to expose a little bit of forehead, to give a little bit of a vertical accentuation right there, so that their faces didn't look super wide while still having these very strong fringes that they decided to have. So the same thing holds true with clothing. To me, minimal and classic is great. This is a little bit softer version of it. Clean lines, right? Minimal and classic, where would that play well? Obviously, in most of our careers, it plays pretty well. But you can see that minimal and classic doesn't necessarily have to be boring, right? Then there's business chic. Clearly, again, all beautiful girls. But I love on the first one, over on the left, I love the anti-body shape. That works really great for people who don't have perfect bodies. When we use anti-body shape clothing that's not designed to necessarily be form-fitting. When we use things that actually accentuate the parts of our bodies that are the parts that we like the most. This is business casual. So I personally, when I talked about the Malibu thing, I personally think that business casual is really what mostly is going on these days. The casual idea means that you're not having to try so hard. That implies success, as long as you look like you're successful. Where it turns into a problem is when people become casual and they don't look like they're successful at the same time. And so then they just look casual and unsuccessful. The combination of being able to say, well, I've got like this really great outfit, but it's still very casual feeling in its own way, or that my hair is casual. See how her hair is kind of thrown up in a very soft, casual way. The other one in the middle, her hair is down and it's not super perfect, but it all looks very, very flattering still. That they're not so like intense about saying, I have to be put on. Sometimes when people wear too much makeup, honestly, to me, that implies that they're trying way too hard and maybe they're a little bit too intense. And that kind of scares people. So to me, makeup should be clean and nude and accentuating obviously the good features, but not going crazy with the application, the Tammy Faye eyes and all that stuff. But at the same time, not wearing makeup means that you didn't take the time. You didn't put the time into concerning yourself with how you look. I don't think I have to tell people that in this room. You guys all know what you're doing, I'm sure. But here's another example of business casual. See how all their hair is, again, very soft, very undone. This is dark and edgy. This is my favorite category just because I like this sort of thing. But the idea on the far left, or sorry, the far right of like layering things, of doing things that are like playing with lengths, short and long lengths, turtleneck that's like cropped up to the navel. Again, the middle one with the anti-body shape stuff. The far left, that's really great for people who are hippie when you start getting into things that are a little bit looser on the bottom of the leg. Again, all of them have very soft hair. And then, again, like motorcycle jackets, cool leather pieces. And so to me, this works really well if you're in a little bit of a more, creative field, if you want to kind of present that part of yourself. It doesn't work for everybody, but in my industry, this is where I push people. So let's see. Right now with hair, we're really doing a lot of very soft, textury looks. A lot of things that are like, do you know what lobs are? Like long bobs that are shattered and broken, with hand-painted colors, not so perfectly stripy, you know, very loose, very, again, unkept. We keep talking about casual. These are meant to be looking casual, but super not casual hairdos, right? So they take a lot of skill and knowledge to be able to create, but they're meant to look easy. Lived-in hair. Have you guys checked out any of that stuff? There's a salon company called Ramirez Tran that's really branded that well. Lived-in hair, this idea that you're unfussed with when in fact you're pretty fussy, is very much what's happening right now. So, you know, all kinds of texture, either that or like on darker colors, like kind of clean, darker colors, nothing to like put on. So with darker colors, we're not seeing a lot of highlights and a lot of stuff being done to the color. It's meant to look clean, like a very kind of smooth palette. Still seeing a lot of curls. I'm sure you guys see that. A lot of waves, but it's really because the texture thing is what's happening. Even if your hair doesn't have waves and you don't want to spend the time to put all of those curls and stuff in it, it's still, if you get the right haircut, soften it down, break it up a little bit, put the right color in it to give it some color texture, and then put some time into making the texture work with a blow dry, it can still look really cool, really edgy, like the girl on the left where her hair isn't done, but it looks very appropriate with her outfit. I kind of blasted through all of that stuff, but do you guys have any questions about any of this?
I have one.
Yes, please.
So you're talking about hair and stuff. Well, my hair is naturally wavy, and so I blow dry it straight and go through all the fuss to get straight hair. But, you know, when I look at myself in the mirror, sometimes I say, geez, that wavy look just doesn't look professional.
Mm-hmm.
And so just wondering, what's your take on that? Is that perception changing?
So, you know, it's a good question. So there are a couple things at play with waves. So waves generally, even though they're wavy, are not naturally wavy. If you look at most of the stuff that's out there, like this girl on the right, her hair is wavy, but it looks very loose and natural and soft and unfussed with. But that's all done with curling irons. None of it's natural. None of it just sits that way. So even if we're doing waves, this is why I'm saying maybe not everybody wants to put the time into that. But if you're going to, working with a curling iron, and I can show you some really easy, quick tips to work with the curling iron. But like, you know, as we get older, many of us start to get gray hair. Not everybody is blessed with the kind of gray hair that goes really soft and straight and acts like their gray hair did, or their not gray hair did back in the day. Some people get a little bit witchy, a little bit wiry, it starts to freak out. And so if you have curly hair and wiry hair, then it all just turns into, you know, potentially a mess. I don't know if that's some of what's going on, but like using a curling iron if you want to accentuate the curl is the best thing. But it also we want to make sure that we have the right haircut to give some loose texture. So again, look at this girl on the left. On the right. She's got some very soft layers. It looks like it's all one length, but if you look around her face, it's all been softened down. So this creates that loose movement. If it's all like one length and then we curl it, it just looks sort of like Cindy Brady curls and doesn't end up looking very good. The easiest way to accomplish these kinds of curls, it's really actually quite simple, is you don't even have to have any curling iron skills. Just take a curling iron, let's say 1.5 inches, something like that, thick. Use it like a wand. Do you guys all know how to use a wand? Yeah, grab a piece. Larger pieces give you softer, like that. Smaller pieces give you tighter. So grab a piece, whatever size it is that you want. Take the wand, and you don't have to open and close the thing, right? It's that simple. You just take it and you wrap the hair around it. Don't let go. Wrap the hair around it, right? Wrap it this way, away from your face. Wrap it this way, away from your face. And then if you want the curls to stand out, wrap one back, run one forward. One back, one forward. If you want them all to sort of loosely blend in together, wrap them all the same direction. It'll just give you some texture, but not give you that same definition. And then mess the hair up a little bit. So when I say don't let go, the reason for that is that we're not looking to wrap the hair around the curling iron like a ribbon. If you can imagine, I should have brought a curling iron. If you can imagine and you're taking a piece, as you're wrapping it around, it's starting to twist up as you wrap it around the curling iron. And that twisting creates a little bit of loose variation in the way that the curl looks. It doesn't look so perfect the whole way down. And that's one of the things that helps you to be able to achieve that kind of, more natural feeling texture so that it doesn't all look very the same, right? Because you're twisting it as it goes down because you're not letting go of it. Versus if you took the curling iron and then opened the thing, clipped it in, and then wrapped it up, it would wrap it up like a ribbon. So when it fell out, it would look like a ribbon. I think that they're telling me we need to wrap up, but are there other questions? I feel like we didn't get much practical stuff in here. Well, listen, if there aren't, or if there are, I'll be here afterwards. I'm happy to help talk to anybody if I can be of any use. Thank you for your time. I hope it was at least entertaining. And thanks, Brooke.
Thank you.